who you are, and why fundraising is important for you. And of course, if you're interested, your network and LinkedIn profiles. Now, in terms of speakers, we have an amazing panel today to answer all your questions. We have Natalie Rekstad, the founder and CEO of Black Fox Global. Natalie is a visionary social entrepreneur dedicated to aligning capital with a thriving humanity and planet. Tricia is an advancement specialist with deep expertise in cultivating funder relationships and guiding nonprofit teams towards sustainable growth. Her approach blends sharp strategic insight with a warm, collaborative style that helps clients move from overwhelm to traction. Then we have Hamsini. She's a communication and research specialist. She brings data and storytelling to help NGOs articulate impact with clarity and heart. She draws on experience across philanthropy, research, and social innovation to craft messages that inspire meaningful connection. Lastly, we have Wanu. She is a research and advancement specialist. She's passionate about expanding global equity through evidence-based fundraising strategies. Her background in data analysis and international development informs her nuanced, result-driven support for clients across the sector. So I am sure you will have the opportunity to enjoy an amazing session and hopefully have all your questions answered. So without further ado, I'm not going to lose any more time. So I'm just going to pass it over to Natalie. Have
Great.
fun.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. And thank you to everyone joining today. We've had a remarkable journey through the series. Today's the final session focused upon your real world questions and field challenges. And so that you all have the learnings from the whole year, including the plug and play guides we crafted after each masterclass. We'll drop the links to the full series in the chat. A lot of what we're going to be focusing upon today, we went into much deeper dives in some of these master classes. So just want to make sure you have the resources from the full series as well. We'll share out the slides and we'll have a recording of this that we'll publish out as well afterwards. That will also have the resources. But just so you have it in chat, want to make sure that you have those straight away. And also before we dive into the practical, I invite us to take a breath together. We're leading organizations and missions through a time of extraordinary change. And yet here we are, still showing up, still choosing purpose, still choosing love in action. And at Black Fox Global, we know fundraising is sacred work. It's not just about capital, it's about connection, about moving resources toward what is life-giving, what heals, what restores balance. And that takes systems, yes, but it also takes heart. And I also want to acknowledge that funders too are navigating uncertainty, are in struggle, are longing to make meaning, and wanting to trust that their resources are building something enduring. So when we meet them from the place of shared humanity, then partnership becomes possibility. Also, before we get tactical, I want to honor that your presence here is an act of leadership. Your willingness to keep refining, learning, and collaborating is what moves the sector forward. And also I want to honor the brain trust of each of you that are here today. I invite you to put your wisdom into chat. If we're on a topic where you have a success or a pearl of wisdom, invite you to share so that everyone can learn from the genius that you carry, that we all carry. And thank you again for being here. So with that grounding, I want to see what's most alive for you now as we begin our first round. I'll be moderating. I'll contribute wherever it makes sense, but we want to start with a quick poll before each segment. Because we want to basically pull in questions that we've been fielding throughout 2025, but we want to know what of those most resonate with you now, and dive into live discussion and participant Q&A. But it's a dynamic session. Raise your hands, ask a question, drop questions in the chat. I'll call upon you when there's an appropriate opening, but we're going to begin with the poll and launch with that most popular question of what's coming up for you now. So we'll launch the poll now, and that'll kick off the session. And Tricia will be Trisha will be talking about cultivation and funder relationships. And so this one's about really what it takes to build and sustain meaningful relationships with funders in today's landscape. So just go ahead and vote if you haven't already. It should be no more than 30 seconds. And yeah, Trisha's guided many organizations through the heart of fundraising. Okay, let's see. What should we keep in mind when reaching out to funders, given the increased need for resources that have resulted from cuts to global aid? So that's the number one. I'm actually going to screenshot that to make sure I got this captured. We won't necessarily get to all of them. We can weave the other two questions back in if there's space, but I want to make sure I capture the order. Or actually, Dana, I'll ask you to queue up another one if it makes sense. So yeah, Trisha, what should we keep in mind when reaching out to funders, given the increased need for resources that has resulted in cuts to global aid? And we'll pin Trisha next. Actually, we can pin all four of us, because Wonu, Hamsini, the invitation is for them to jump in as well with their insights.
Definitely. Thank you, Natalie. Thanks so much, everyone, for taking the time to be here. I think we all realize that this is an unprecedented time in fundraising, that we are seeing historic cuts to funding globally, and funders are even feeling the pressure of being under attack for the values and the programs that they have championed over the last few decades. And so, I just want to echo what Natalie said in the beginning, that, funders are a group of people, of humans just like us. And as they are figuring out their strategy during this time, remembering their humanity, remembering to think about building relationships with them as people, not just institutions, I think can really set the right tone for all of the actions you take around outreach and cultivation. I think one of the things that they're experiencing right now, and maybe we're experimenting with this too, is kind of the rapid increase of using AI to generate maybe outreach emails or proposals and LOIs. And so I think now more than ever is an important time to distinguish yourself as an actual human that's reaching out. And so making sure you are doing your homework on who that funder is and why they resonate with you personally or with your organization's mission. Understanding and being able to convey a connection maybe with the program officer that maybe is sector wide or comes from a previous role that they have, something that shows that you've really taken the time to understand who they are and what they do, and gives a compelling reason for why you're reaching out. I think another thing, to remember right now is you want to convey a sense of urgency, but not desperation. Relationship building, authentic relationship building really takes time. You don't make a new friend by just asking for a favor right up front. And so finding that thread that you can really build a relationship around, maybe it's a shared learning, maybe it's something you think the funder knows that you really want to tap into in a genuine way. So I think as we're thinking about this context, leaning into relationship building, distinguishing yourself from kind of that high volume, maybe, AI generated approach that also includes, any kind of in-person interactions that you're able to have through events, through a warm connection or mutual relationship that can introduce you for a coffee or a quick virtual chat. And then drafting those highly customized emails that not are just an initial outreach, but that follow-up, because they're humans, they're being, inundated with communications. And so showing that you're taking the time to give them some space to, deal with a full inbox and then come back to them and give them that grace to respond at a later time, I think can make a huge difference. One other just quick thing to think about is we also know that funders are doubling down on their existing grantees. So while I just talked about, that important piece of building new funder relationships, don't forget about your existing funders right now. There's a chance that you can go back to your current funders and explain the situation that you're in, provide more data and context about what your organization is experiencing with the philanthropic landscape right now, and see if they can partner with you on expanding your work during this critical time, or helping to sustain your work at a time when getting new funding might take longer because of the challenging landscape right now.
Nice. Thank you, Tricia. It's such a great lens. I have a couple of things just to add. You brought up AI. I want to say it's so easy to lean on AI and generate, professional persistence outreaches. But I have to say there's a synthetic quality to AI. So I'm not saying don't use it. Of course, use it, but making sure it has your energetic signature, your voice, you're editing it. So it can give you a bit of a head start, but be really careful that it is coming across as authentic. So I just wanted to name that because we're all relying heavily upon AI. We can't, I love from my early corporate days, there was a saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I feel like that's how it is with AI as well. And things are going at such a rapid clip, but I think people are also leaning on it to the point of losing the authentic voice. So just wanted to name that as well. And Tricia, you also talked about, staying in relationship, building that relationship, pivoting to a sector citizenship role of, I read this article, I thought of you, no ask, no nothing that you're asking from that funder at that time. But, oh, I see, I read in the Guardian, you're doing things this way. We think about it this way. This article made me think of you and, admire what you're doing. And that's it. So again, it's a closed door temporarily while they're hunkering down and figuring out, getting their sea legs. But that's also a gorgeous time to be very elegant about building relationships without the ask built in. And there's more and more and more in other master classes about that. But I wanted to kind of double click on some things that Tricia said. And Tricia, if you had one small behavior to cut through the noise with authenticity, what would you suggest?
I would actually suggest relationship mapping. I think we underestimate the power of our personal and professional networks. And if you can get someone to reach out on your behalf and say, I've been working with this person for so many years and they're doing great work at organization X, and I think you both connecting, you would enjoy each other immensely as people and sharing the work that you do. That just goes such a long way. And I think some folks have just been afraid to ask of, their networks to make those introductions. But we've had, clients at Black Box that have tremendous networks, but they just haven't tapped in, maybe fellow grantees that have experienced a funder and have that intel and have those relationships and can make that connection for you, because I think a lot of us believe that there's enough for all of us. And we want to work in that collaborative environment. So I would definitely say, relationship mapping and tapping into those warm connections that you can make with funders.
Great, thank you. We have a question from chat that was asked from Nidji. I hope I pronounced your name okay. Forgive me if not. After. So, please.
Nidhi.
Okay. Oh, sorry. There was a J in the. So after a great connect at an event, how to bring the funder to closure, or we call it engagement versus close. Oh, my corporate background, I would say close, but engaged. How to bring them to closure.
I would add the second question, because that's about it's kind of overlapping.
Oh, okay.
I've seen you being the buzz of the party and events at School World Forum, Natalie, and I really admire that. Yes, so it's kind of like, what are your top tips? And Trisha, please share as well, because I've managed to make good first connections, but I have not managed to close them or bring them to a funding. And I want to be elegant like you, so
Oh my
please,
gosh.
us.
Well, what's hilarious is I think it's an open secret. I'm an introvert, and at the skull party we actually co-host. I'm hiding in small rooms and behind pillars 20 or 25% of the time, because I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of people. So although I'm an adapted introvert, I know how to do it. So anyway, thank you. Let's see. So I guess that was directed to me, and Trisha, maybe I'll just tap. First of all, I set an intention. Actually, it was Zoom chat's working, so I can turn off my phone for text. I set an intention, may I go where I'm needed most, or I said it like even before the Zoom, I set an intention, there was grounding. And so how I move through spaces is very intentional. What I choose to emanate, I lead with generosity. I also lead with like as though I'm making this up now, but I think it's on a cellular level, I do it, so I don't think about it anymore, but let the person I'm speaking with feel seen, feel heard. So I'm not moving through the space of what can I get, what can I extract. At Black Fox Global, actually, open source ethos, like we all lead with generosity. We hire through the framework of Adam Grant's givers, takers, matchers, give and take. Black Fox Global is heaven on earth for givers. And so it's sort of a cultural thing. So I think that's so embodied. And so maybe with your teams, to be very intentional about what you want to embody, and then how you're energetically moving through spaces. It's far more magnetic than it is a mad dash, or oh, I need to get, or oh my God, my board sent me here, I'm under so much pressure. It's like, breathe. So that's a tip of the iceberg. Actually, it's not so much a tip of the iceberg. It's actually quite foundational to how I move in spaces. In fact, Opportunity Collaboration is coming up in just a few days in Portugal, and I've already set what are my morning intentions, and I have a calendar ping every morning and then twice in the day to remind me of what's my anchor, and it is that may I go where I'm needed most, things along those lines. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Trisha.
Thanks, Natalie. I think the other piece of it is that follow-up. So when you have that genuine interaction and you're leaving that conversation with real positive energy and connection, how are you following up on that? Are you sending an email a week later? I hope you're recovering from school. We know how much it takes out of all of us. I was really excited to hear you mention this when we talked. I would love a follow-up conversation with you about that. So kind of that, again, relationship building and really trying to kind of build on the conversation that you had, or find that thread where you think they're going to be most interested to follow up, and then carry that through. I think there's very few examples where you have a conversation at school and the next conversation is about funding. I think it is more of a long game. And yeah, and then even if they don't respond, we call it professional persistence, if you've heard us speak before, but that disciplined approach around, maybe you read another article, like Natalie said, it makes you think of that conversation or think of that person, and you just follow up in a kind way, maybe a couple weeks later, and then that generates that response. So you really do have to be kind of patient, and again, finding that area of connection where there's mutual interest, mutual passion, and use that to try to carry the relationship building through to an opportunity where you can discuss actual collaboration and funding.
Great. And let's see, I'll check in with Dana. You guys can raise your hands, and Dana, oh, actually, I don't know if Dana has visibility into see whose hands are raised, or drop them in the chat. And that way we can get to those. But while we're still in the segment with Trisha, I'll go to the next popular question in the poll, which were the most common mistakes organizations make in the cultivation phase, and how can they avoid them? So back over to you, Trisha.
Sure. I feel like this gets at a little bit of what we were just talking about. I think one very common mistake is nonprofits overly pitching and not listening. And I am guilty of it. I've worked for nonprofits that I just think are the most important cause at the most important time. And it's very hard to like hold myself back from just sharing all of the great work that we do and the need and the impact. But I have learned over, a decade of fundraising that if you can really stop and listen and ask questions of funders, what are they excited about? What are they hearing that's really needed in the sector right now? What pain point do they want to really address with the resources that they have. And using that to then inform the way you're going to frame your own messaging when the time comes to share about your organization. So I think, the very first thing is don't overly pitch, ask questions and genuinely, listen and lead with curiosity. The second thing, also we've touched on a little bit, but is that disciplined approach to follow up. That one conversation with a funder is not going to lead to funding. And these folks are very busy. We know, we are very busy as well, but it really is on us to make it as easy as possible for that funder to keep connecting with us. And it can just be even the briefest note of, I know you must be swamped right now. Just wanted to put this at the top of your inbox again. Would love to meet in the upcoming weeks now that we met at school. Like something very brief, very friendly, but that just makes it very easy for them to respond. I would say another thing, not to sound like a broken record, but it's, not leveraging warm connections. If you can, even if you already have an existing relationship with a funder, but you can bring in a third party that validates the great work that you're doing or your competence in the sector, that can go a long way in building trust with a funder who is navigating a lot of different relationships and just very high demand, especially right now. And then finally, I would just say, not, following up when you get a no from a funder. Funders are going to say no, and they are going to decline opportunities to either meet or for funding. And if you can find, a very graceful way to just say, if you could send me, one line about why we're not the best fit right now with your strategy, that would really help us as we're internally, preparing for our next funding cycle. Like something that just gives them a really easy action item, but can give you a glimpse into, what might be that thing you need to tweak next time. And then also, if they take the time to respond, that means they actually are responsive individuals and might respond again. And so you can also make a note that that's a relationship you can try to keep warm. And again, not overly aggressive. We really think that, finding those authentic touch points, if 6 months later you've created some impact or you have a new study that you're publishing that very directly connects to what that funder is working on, sharing that with no ask, but simply we thought you would find this interesting and wanted to make sure to share it with you. So even when you get that no, it's, I would say, not a no forever. It really is an opportunity to learn more and to identify those funders that might be open to following up at a later time.
Thank you, Tricia. Actually, in one of the master classes, we go into a deeper dive with this with 2 funders who concur and have actually gave examples of funding that was originally a no that turned into a yes later down the line, and what did it look like in between in terms of building that relationship. So, and I'll also add, LinkedIn is an incredible tool, and also Google Alerts. So put these people on Google Alerts, so whenever something lands in the New York Times or lands in the Guardian or lands in Chronicle of Philanthropy, you're getting a ping, so that it gives you a chance to say bravo on LinkedIn, something just to stay top of mind. Again, that's that professional persistence in a very elegant way. So thank you, Tricia. So I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I'm sensitive about time as well. So thank you, Tricia. And Tricia, of course, invite you to chime in as well in the other segments. But we'll do the next poll. The next one is going to be featuring Hamsini Ravi, who focuses on research, storytelling, and funder trends. So you know the drill, about 30 seconds or so. Just fill out what's most coming up for you. So shifting from cultivation to communication. This is where the story you tell becomes the strategy you live. And Hamsini has a genius for turning data into dialogue, helping organizations speak effectively to funders. She's also the lead curator now of the Black Fox Brief. We'll drop Black Fox Brief into chat as well. If you don't get this, encourage you to sign up. We'll drop the today's Black Fox Brief that dropped just not too long ago into chat as well. So there's a much larger curation team, but Hamsini is probably the most educated person in the sector, along with the other curators, based upon all that I'm a contributor to, but barely. Really, the team's on the front lines. And so for those of you, I would love to hear who gets Black Fox brief and any feedback. We love hearing refinements, suggestions, things along those lines. So let's see, we'll wait for the poll. Okay, great. So the first question, being the winner, 44% of people, what are your favorite sources or methods for uncovering aligned funders beyond the usual databases? So over to you, Hamsini.
Thanks, Natalie. So this is a question that actually frequently comes up with our clients, because when we do prospect research for them, they say, okay, so we know these databases, there are paid and unpaid ones, but where else can we go? So I think there are a couple of, underestimated places. One is like when you look up event lists that are relevant to your thematic area. So suppose you work on, SEL and social emotional learning conferences that particularly address, say, school SEL programs, or if you're in WASH, market-based approaches to WASH. So some of these events have like delegate lists, and these are great places where you can see funders that are value aligned, that are thematically aligned, and they could be lurking indoors. So I would like note down the names of these organizations, names of these people, connecting with them before the convening, looking up names, looking up, what if they've written articles in your area of expertise. And I think the second place is looking up peer organizations. They may or may not work in your geographic area. So if you work in education in sub-Saharan Africa, um, who's for funding, education in your region, sub-region, or in other parts of the world. So I would definitely, like Natalie said, like how you'd set up Google alerts for funders, I'd also set up Google alerts for peer organizations and other organizations in your sectors. Follow them and also see who they've been funded in the past, because sometimes organizations outgrow funders, right? And you could be at that right stage for the funder at that moment. So these are just some of the ideas. The other is, I think, just keeping abreast with, the big publications in nonprofit reporting. Like the Black Fox Brief is a great resource for this. We feature insights from funders. So many of these funders, they publish insights, they publish reflections. So those could be great places to find funders.
Great, thank you. So I have actually a follow-on question for you, Hamsini. If a team had just 1 hour a week to devote to discovery, where would you have them start?
1 hour a week. So I would be very disciplined about prospect research. So if I have 1 hour, I would devote like just 20 minutes to finding 3 names, but the rest of the for 40 minutes to, making notes about the funder, what values do they follow? Is it something that's aligned to our organizational values and ethos? Whom have they funded recently? Have they made any big grants that, are similar to the kind of work that my organization is doing? So I think it's not just finding a funder, but it's also sort of creating a profile for them, and keeping that updated. And of course, also who is the key contact most relevant to your work? Because like they could have a thematic lead, but they could not be relevant to your work. So you need to find the right person who is like aligned to your organization, your thematic area, and your work.
Okay, super. And actually, Wonu, you do a lot around yeah, Wonu is another one, another unicorn who has mastery on all the things. But is there anything you'd like to add in terms of, the segment about storytelling and created research models.
Yeah, I feel like Hamsini covered this really well, to be honest. I think the best thing is to always think outside the box, and I'm not going to spoil too much, because I'll talk about this a bit more in my segment about being creative around kind of setting research parameters when conducting prospect research. But I think definitely think outside the box when trying to, identify new funders. And just to add in terms of other tools, Hamsini really, hit the nail on the head in terms of, alternative sources. But I really recommend LinkedIn. As a prospect researcher, I found so many funding opportunities on LinkedIn. So furthering funders that are on your radar is a really good thing to do in addition to setting up Google alerts, because they often release like requests for proposals or big strategic updates on LinkedIn. So that's another top tip just to add there.
Great, thank you, thanks. And again, invitation for folks to add, any follow-on questions or new questions in the chat for Hamsini. The second most popular one from the poll question is, Hamsini, how do you recommend teams maintain a shared understanding of their funding narrative as the organization grows and evolves? Oop, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I think it's very important for an organization and not just the chief fundraiser, but everybody to sort of be singing the same tune about the organization, right? Because whether you're managing programs or operations or HR, it's very important to be clear and consistent about your organization's story and your impact. So at Black Fox Global, what we do is we develop a set of core messages around your identity, work, and approach. So we also complement this with some talking points that sort of cover, all your organization's work, programs, and impact. So I think it's so worth for like your the key people in your organization, depending on the size, to sort of come together as a retreat every year or biannually to say, okay, do we still resonate with these messages? Does this capture us? Because all our work evolves. Uh, or is there like, some words that don't really define us? Like we used to be a systems change organization, but now we are more in the trenches, or our theory of change has changed. So it's very important, uh, you know again, I'm repeating this, you don't need to be a fundraiser, but even a program person interacts with the funder during a site visit. So if they're going to be giving you like, if they're going to be giving the funder like a completely different picture, that doesn't really sit very well. So I think this is a great exercise to have. Some organizations do this very well. They have like a shared fundraising narrative that's shared with new joiners during orientation, and that's revisited. And this is not only very helpful in getting everyone on the same page, this ensures that your proposals are consistent. This ensures that your messaging is consistent, what you put out in social media, your pitch deck. So, everything is sort of saying the same thing, which is really the building blocks of fundraising.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. While organizations have an overarching narrative, you as an individual have your unique story about why you care about that mission. And so we created something called crafting your why. So while everyone on the teams are singing from the same sheet of music, why you have a heart for the work looks very, very different than a peer, a colleague, a board member. You're all around the same table, but what got you there is very different. And that's where so much emotional texture can come in. So again, that's in one of the masterclass series. We talk about crafting your why. It's in the open source resources we'll share as well. But I wanted to name that as well. That's part of what makes your story really, really compelling, because people want to connect on an emotional level. I mean, there's all these studies about we make decisions emotionally, but then we have the intellectual checklist to actually justify it. So if I really connect with someone, I'm going to bend intellectually to make that fit within that program. So being really clear on your personal why this is uniquely yours to do. My personal philanthropies around women and girls, our deepest passions often spring from our deepest wounds. So I can go very resonant with some women in that space, and the depth of connection is beautiful. And then we're really, really, I don't know why I have a music analogy keeping popping to mind, but just that there's that resonance, that melody, that harmony, that like, yes, I want to work with you. And so anyway, I'll stop talking and just, but I did want to add that. And Nidhi had another good question. Oh no, or this one's from Amara. Oh, Nidhi. Okay, I'll do Nidhi first. How do we deal with silence and no response and be creative about building funder relationships, raise profile of the organizations and projects? And this is something where everyone can really jump in.
Well, so I think this is a great question, Nidhi, and something like something that our clients also pretty frequently face. So I think one important thing is like a silence, like Natalie said, does not mean a no yet unless a funder has, explicitly said, hey, no, we are not going to be taking forward this relationship forward. So here I would really recommend professional persistence at a sort of respectful cadence. So if a funder needs like say a 6 monthly follow-up, or sometimes there could be interest but some resistance, so maybe then it's a monthly follow-up. And second is being very creative about sharing, like, so suppose I published an annual report about my organization, and there is a particular case story that speaks to say prevention against gender-based violence. And I know that I had a conversation with a program officer about community and gender-based violence. So I'd send them only that story and say, this story from the field reminded me of the conversation that we had, and like, I'd love to chat with you about what we're doing and what that program addresses. And sometimes the ask may not even be about funding or, hey, are you interested in funding us? It could be, can we jointly write an article together? Or can we run a campaign together? Now, we have seen that even the most resistant funders, it can start off as a joint campaign, and 2 years later, it could lead to a funding relationship. So definitely, I mean, I would definitely say Trisha will, of course, add that a no is not a no permanently, and there are lots of opportunities to sort of keep a warm relationship before the funding actually comes in.
Yeah, and I'll touch upon something that we guide clients with a lot, and Skull was mentioned earlier. I'm a big believer in if you want to be in the room, create the room. So, like for example, at the Skull World Forum, I won't go into how we launched the SDG series at Skull, but basically strategically, I'll just say how we advise clients. It's you have a topic that is very relevant for a number of funders. And it's like, hey, I'm preparing this for at the Ecos, at Marmalade, at the sidebar, or as a main session at Skull. I want to be, could you be a resource, be a panelist? Would you co-host it? This is something core to your work. So now you're in relationship in kind of a sideways way, and you're collaborating and working together. That's one example. And I gave a very clunky way of saying, how to do this. There's a whole elegance to doing this, but you can be you can like co-write it, like what Hamsini said around co-writing like a white paper, or release some content. So there's other ways to be in relationship with the funders that have nothing to do with an ask, but they are naturally getting to know you on a deeper and deeper level, not just your work, but you as a human being, your authenticity, your ferocity in this work. So I just wanted to name that as well. And Amara had a great question, and this too could be for anyone who wants to jump in. What's the most underrated signal funders look for that distinguishes a venture ready for catalytic investment from one that's simply well packaged? So let me repeat the question. What's the most underrated signal funders look for that distinguishes a venture ready for catalytic investment from one that's simply well packaged? So anyone want to jump in on that?
I can. I think it's the metrics of impact is what I would say. Funders have gotten very savvy in terms of what they're looking for, with not just, how many programs have you implemented, how many community members have you reached, but what are the actual results, behavior change, outcomes that you're seeing as the result of your work. And unfortunately, a lot of funders are even looking for that higher level monitoring and evaluation, like third-party research that validates those findings. And so maybe to the point that was made earlier, sometimes funders will help you pay for that if you build the right partnership. If they're interested in seeing how how effective those kinds of programs are being, will they partner with you to fund an outsourced study to validate the findings that maybe right now you only have the resources to track internally. So I would say you can put out really shiny communications, but if you don't have the programmatic substance and impact behind it, then I do think the conversation with funders could end unless you can turn it into an opportunity where you are, admitting that you don't have that yet, but that you have a plan to get there, and you're hoping a partnership could be a part of that plan.
Okay. Super. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. Any other questions from the chat? If not, I'm looking at time and we can move on. And there's also going to be space for questions after the more formal segmented spaces. So let's now move to Wonu. So we'll go to the next poll. And so Wonu's focus upon prospect research, ethics, and strategic foresight. So again, the drill. Take the next 30 seconds. What questions are most coming up for you? And and Wonu brings a strategist's clarity and a researcher's rigor. As I said, one of these amazing unicorns who can do the depth of the prospect research, be able to tell the story in a very compelling, funder-centric, engaging way, and also engage funders. So deeply, highly relational as well, and brilliant at helping organizations see patterns, the funders that truly align, and the partnerships that hold real long-term promise. And same thing, Hamsini and Tricia, jump in if you have something to share that could serve the folks here. So, okay, great. So here are the results. So the question, the most popular question, Wonu, is what's one data point organizations consistently overlook that could reshape their fundraising strategy?
Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for the conversation so far, and for Natalie for moderating, Trisha and Hamsini for your inputs, and for all of you for attending and for your questions. It's been really enlightening. So in relation to this question, it might actually seem like a really obvious answer, but I think like the key data point when developing your fundraising strategy is ensuring that it links to your organizational strategy. And if you don't have an organizational strategy, you should definitely create one as a starting point. But let's say on the premise that you do have one, what's your mission, your vision? What are your targets? The activities that you want to deliver, the things that the impact you want to create, the things you want to achieve as an organization. When developing your fundraising strategy, those are the resources you need to make all of that happen. So they very much should go hand in hand. And you'll be very surprised, how many, organizations I've worked with that synergy isn't there. And I always advise like it just doesn't make sense, because you need the resources to ensure that important work that you're trying to do can happen. So when developing kind of your fundraising strategy in terms of the target markets you want to like outreach to, so whether it's foundations or bilateral, multilateral donors, individual donors, corporates, and so on, ensuring that you keep in mind who is best placed to help you raise the resources you need to make the work you do happen. I think there's been a lot of conversation this year around income diversification. I think especially in light of the funding cuts, everyone's looking to kind of think outside the box, approach funders that maybe traditionally they haven't in the past, to bridge gaps in income, or to ensure sustainability. I think awesome, that's great. If you have the resources and the willingness to explore that, definitely do so. one thing I do advise is definitely just see what works for your organization. There's no one size fits all approach when it comes to that. So definitely keep that in mind when developing your fundraising plan. We're now reaching the end of this year. I'm sure everyone's kind of thinking about the year ahead and making planning for, the kind of fundraising activities that you want to do. So definitely keep that in mind. Income diversification can be a really good thing, but just ensure that works for your organization, that you have the resources to make it happen. So whether you want to invest in somebody that, let's just say your background is raising money from trust and foundations, but you're actually really interested in looking to high net worth individuals, does that mean you want to invest in, a member of staff that has that background that can help you kind of build that pipeline, raise that income, or do you have, capacity in-house? What does that look like? So just definitely see what looks best, what works best for you in terms of your, resources that you have, to make sure that it's aligned. But definitely back to the original point, ensure that your fundraising plan and strategy aligns with your organizational mission and vision, and ensure that the two go hand in hand.
Okay. Super. Thank you, Wonu. I want to jump to the next question that was in the poll because I really am curious about this and the evolution of how we've been thinking about it. How can organizations be creative when it comes to prospect research to build their pipeline and punch above their weight in this current competitive funding landscape?
I think Hamsini definitely touched based on this in her segment around thinking outside the box, with funding resources that you can look into. So like peer organizations, who's funded them, looking at their websites, their annual reports, etc. But at Black Fox Global, what we do when conducting research is that we use kind of primary entry points and secondary entry points. And what I mean by that is that we take research with an intersectional approach. So we look at different aspects of an organization's work to try and find different points of entry that funders could support them. So let's say, you're an organization that provides improved wash facilities in East Africa. Obviously, on paper, you'd be like, okay, so I'm going to look at all the funders that fund wash. But then you start to realize that that's a really limited number of funders. So then you kind of break down your work. With improved wash facilities, that means that women and girls who are traditionally tasked with collecting water from far distances, you know, can go to school, because if there's improved wash facilities, they don't have to do that anymore. So girls can go to school. So then donors, for example, that are interested in improving school retention for girls, girls' education, those are donors that you can target. Or those that are focused on kind of improving community facilities, community development, sustainable development. You could also target them. So kind of thinking outside the box, and that's kind of what we do at Black Fox Global. Try to kind of break down your work across different thematic areas to widen the scope of funders that can support you. So that's like my biggest tip in terms of being creative, think outside the box, see how your different aspects of your work could appeal to different donors, and use that as a superpower to expand the number of donors that could be interested in your work.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Anu. Curiosity, how do you see this evolving with AI in research?
It's such a good question, and it's definitely something that's come up with our clients a lot this year. I think AI can be a helpful tool to find at least a starting point of funders. Let's just say you're this wash organization, and like, hey, I'm this wash organization working in Kenya, who can fund me? And then it'll come up with like, I don't know, a list of 20, 30, 40 funders. But then it wouldn't kind of give you that breakdown of information that, for example, a human could do, and what we do at Black Fox Global. So, we can advise like, hey, we've seen they funded peer organizations or people in your networks, maybe you want to reach out to them to broker an introduction to this funder, or it looks like their strategy has changed within the last couple of years. They're no longer funding in East Africa, and they're now funding in South Asia. And with that kind of more in-depth research, we can bring out those findings that maybe AI can't on the first glance. So I think my kind of top tip is it can be a useful mechanism, but kind of take it with a grain of salt, that the human, kind of investigation can bring out a lot more information for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's a question from the chat, Manesia. I'm not sure if I got your name right. And forgive me if I'm out of context, but the question is, how about legal recognition and bank account? So maybe get a little, maybe, I'm not, am not sure, Manasya, the context for that. So maybe hop on camera.
Yes.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
hello. Thank you so much to having me. It's my first time I attending Black Folks meeting, and I was hearing from you guys, and I'm from Angola, one of the 54 country of Africa. We have many civic society organization that they are not legalizing in their country because of the bureaucracy. But also they are doing great job. They are having amazing impact in the community. I want to ask you if the Black folks can have this organization make they're legalized in their country, but also if there is funding organization that they don't focus on this only like organization that are with legalized, but also this one who are working on the process to be legalized, and they don't have bank account like by organization. Sometimes they do funding as a members, and they have like personal incoming. How should we work together and help them?
Mm,
I can take a first stab at this, and we'll have Trish and Hamsini, please feel free to jump in as well as Natalie, of course. So actually, this is such a great question. We touched base on this briefly in a session we did with Catalyst now early in the year that was focused on research and the kind of, I would say the kind of administrative aspects when, trying to identify deeply aligned funders in terms of eligibility. So this really depends. I think kind of big advice is, when kind of looking at funders and eligibility, seeing what kind of requirements they have. There will be some funders out there that, for example, only fund 501c3, tax exempt organizations registered in the US. There's some that say that, we fund any charitable organizations based on the equivalency of what that is in your respective country. So if you have, local registered charitable status or NGO status, they will fund you. So really, it's really important that as you're conducting a research, look at the eligibility requirements to ensure that it's aligned with, your current organizational status and those that you're working with in your network. Where there is and there actually are, and I think in recent years, an increased number of donors, especially those in the kind of progressive human rights space, that are a lot more open-minded around that, and fund individuals or grassroots, community-based organizations that they don't need that kind of, restrictive, maybe for lack of a better word, kind of governance requirements. So definitely look out for those kind of funders, because I'm definitely seeing a lot more of those coming, especially kind of more progressive human rights space that understand the importance of, trust-based philanthropy and being flexible and distributing funds. So definitely look out for those kind of funders as well. And then in your own kind of, within the situation you're working in now, maybe, explore what that looks like to kind of get registered status as a NGO, as a charity, where you're working. If that's proving problematic, you can go through like a kind of donor advisory fund, or some kind of mechanism that can receive funding on your behalf and distribute it to you. Definitely do your research. Thank you, Lisa, for adding that into the chat. We did do a blog around kind of fiscal sponsorship, local registration, legal registration. So definitely see what works best for you. And there's definitely some kind of intermediary organizations that can distribute funding for less of a fee, and are really being mindful of, the power dynamics within that, and, how that can affect how much money you get at the end of the day. So definitely there's a lot of different resources out there.
great. Thank you. Thank you, Wonu.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, anyone else want to chime in on that? The third question I'm really curious about. So I know it didn't make the very top cut, but Wonu, I am curious, what are some ethical red flags to watch for when considering new funders or corporate partners?
Yeah, I think this is such a good question. I think it's, again, not like a one size fits all approach. It really depends on the ethics and values that your organization holds. in terms of the work that you do and the kind of partners that you want to work with. So I'm a resource activist, and I really believe in like the power of kind of value aligned partnerships and building partnerships with funders where you have, essentially aligned values and ethics. So, as part of kind of the research work we do at Black Folks, it really does depend on the client we work with. Some clients are very instrumental that they don't want to work with funders that have investments in extractive industries, tobacco, pharmaceutical, fossil fuels, or working with funders that maybe are linked to governments that have very skeptical human rights practices. So I think it really depends on the ethics and values that you hold. I think it's important that you have a due diligence policy. It doesn't have to be a 10-page document, whatever works best for your organization, but a policy that you can refer to that, if you do identify a funder, or if a funder does come to you and say, hey, we're really interested in working with you, but you do some digging into them and you find some things that are a bit suspect that, you're not sure aligns with your values or actually maybe avoids the reputational damage it can cause you, you can refer to that policy. We have worked with clients that, they do kind of escalate those decisions to leadership or their board. So when they can't make that judgment call, their board kind of does it on behalf of the organization. So that's maybe something you want to look into. Do you have kind of like a approval system within your organization to make that decision when there's a gray area? So again, definitely just see what works best for you, but I think definitely having some kind of due diligence policy or understanding your organization is a great start.
Great, thank you. Hamsini, you look at research through the communications lens as well. I just want to pivot back over to you to do with this topic. Anything you'd want to share about translating research into compelling messaging?
Yeah. So earlier I had shared about, consistent organizational messaging, having like this one document with core messages. Now there's no reason why if you research like a particular funder, or like a foundation or a collaborative or even an open call, there's no reason why you can't find a balance between your core organizational messaging, and that also sort of subtly reflects the values and the ethos of what the funder believes in or what they're looking for in that particular proposal. So I think for me, it's very important that you stay true to who you are, because you exist for a reason and there is a funder for every organization. But you also sort of signal to the funder, grant proposal or in your outreach email or your pitch deck that, I think there is a lot of strong, uh, correlation between us. There's a lot of strong synergies. So it takes a few tries to be rooted to who you are, but also showcase synergy. So we have done that at Black Fox when we put out funder profiles and then we begin the outreach. We consciously look for values or programmatic or thematic alignments that connects you and the funder, and that's how we frame all our outreach. And in case there's an LOI or an invitation to apply for a grant, we sort of ensure that everything we have written cap is like subtly reflects the funder and or that particular open call.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. There's a new question from Nidhi. What is your guide to a fundraiser? How to divide their time, research versus meetings versus pitches versus grant writing versus events? Is there even is such a thing as a guide? Actually, maybe we should be creating one. It's a really good question, especially if you're wearing all the hats, and many, many, many of you are. So anyone want to tackle that? I mean, we have such amazing experts that actually do wear several hats in organizations. So yeah, Trisha, you have this deep experience with all the
Yeah,
hats.
I can jump in. I mean, the answer definitely depends on your organization and where you're at with having prospects to begin with. If you don't have prospects, then you don't have anyone to reach out to or grants to write. So Starting with that prospect research, I really like a cadence when I was a development director of a global fundraising team of twice a year, really looking at my current pipeline and seeing which funders felt viable, felt like there's action, which ones there's strong alignment, but for whatever reason, they're not getting the message or they're just not able to respond. But you want to keep those relationships warm. And then who kind of needs to like just go off the list for maybe 6 months or a year, and you can always revisit them down the road. So you want to tighten up that list. And from there, what that helps you do is determine how much time you need to do some more prospect research. And then really think about with the number of prospects that you have, how much time do you think it will take to do that outreach and follow up? I know having that dedicated outreach time is really important for me. So I just put it on my calendar multiple times a week. Otherwise, it just gets lost. And I find it very hard to go from like being in a meeting to then sending like an authentic email and then jumping into that next meeting. So if I can put like a 2 or 3 hour block where I just get into that rhythm of like, who is this funder and what do I want to say to them? And what did I say the last time? And how long has it been? And keeping really great notes about all of those touch points so that you're, not being redundant, you're not being like too aggressive with your approach and your timeline. And so I think a lot of these different tasks build on each other. But I would say the more you start doing each of them, if you can track the amount of time it's taking and really build it into a calendar schedule the way you would meetings, I need that level of structure and discipline to make sure it gets done and have the metrics to hold myself accountable. We didn't get to this question, but Black Fox metrics that I kind of live or die by, it's not, the revenue in the door at the stage where we're helping nonprofits. It's, how many touch points are getting out over what period of time? What is our response rate? That can really help us understand if those communications are working or if we need to, retool them. What kind of responses are we getting? Are they positive? Are they kind of neutral, not now, but maybe later? Are they hard declines? And that can help inform your strategy with each of those different funders. Are you getting meetings? I would say this is, I think, the most important metric. Are funders willing to meet with you and talk more? I saw another question in the chat that I don't know got answered, but I think if you're an organization that's working on long-term change and you feel like you might be judged by those short-term metrics, having a conversation where you can help that funder understand what is a realistic timeline to show change and why that is so important in a sector that moves on from trend to trend. You can really tap into some of those trust-based funders that are starting to move in that direction, or funders that are more comfortable in the advocacy space that understand that change doesn't happen on an annual programmatic basis. And then a final metric that I think is really important is how many invitations are you getting to submit an LOI or submit a proposal? A lot of nonprofits focus on just getting those proposals out the door to any funders that have open calls. And we see a lot of energy spent there instead of that time of relationship building that could lead to an invitation to submit with a much more, much higher probability that you will get funded. And it's very hard. I think leadership in nonprofits and board members sometimes like to see this very high number of proposals out the door, but the work of fundraising and relationship building can feel a little invisible. So I think having those hard metrics also really helps create conversation and communication with your team, with your leadership about what you're doing to advance fundraising efforts beyond just submitting cold proposals, that now the competition is even greater in the environment that we're working within. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I call those Hail Mary grants, where it's just, yes. And also, and thank you, Tricia, for answering the question about, being boxed into short-term metrics. That was a question from Amara and actually a second piece of that question was, how do funders assess transformational potential versus immediate scalability? So does anyone want to tackle that segment of the question as well? How do funders assess transformational potential versus immediate scalability?
I think I can maybe build on the answer that I gave. I do think having, the right metrics and having kind of your short-term metrics, but to show how they're leading to those longer-term transformational outcomes is important. I think going back to that piece about having some third-party research that validates that theory of change is working or has worked. But I think, again, if you can get a conversation with a funder, because sometimes they can look at materials, they can look at a website and come to certain conclusions. But the power of storytelling, which I think Natalie is hit upon, and weaving in the individual stories of impact with that larger kind of quantifiable story of metrics that show change. I think it's those two together that work the best with funders, and oftentimes the best vehicle for that, especially with a new relationship, is a conversation.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Amara had another great question. Thank you, Amara. I recently led a grant-funded project that faced unexpected compliance constraints. Some collaborators couldn't be approved, and certain content had to be withdrawn under tight timelines. How can ventures engage future funders to preserve the integrity of the creative vision while still aligning with strict funding requirements? It's like a tail wagging the dog question. And so invite anyone to add to that. And I want to circle back to honoring the brain trust of the participants as well. I mean, you're all professionals, you're all leaders in this space. So if a question is landing in the chat where you have experience, absolutely invite your wisdom into this. We're big believers of Kaizen, always improving. This isn't Black Fox on the mountaintop. We have these amazing experts here, but we also, again, want to honor the expertise here. So, and I don't have visibility to chat. I'm focused upon the questions through Dana. So, so I don't know what is populating there, but again, that invitation is open to you. I'm also really, I'm also sensitive about time. So we'll just end with this last question, and then I'll ask for some reflections from everyone. How can ventures engage future funders to preserve the integrity of their creative vision while still aligning with strict funding requirements? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I can just say, just to keep it summarized, I can say a few points, and feel free, everyone, to join on this too. I think it's kind of based kind of what I was saying earlier about kind of value aligned partnerships. And it's really important, I think, at the end of the day, if you need resources to do the important work that you do, but it's also important to have strategic partners that get it and get how you operate and respect your values, your ethics, your approaches, in addition to the partners that you choose to work with. And then again, it's this practice of trust-based philanthropy in this, purest form. So I think if that's something that, you want to adhere to as an organization, keep that in mind in terms of the approach you take with the funders that you want to work with. And definitely just have a lot of transparency, even before writing the proposal or even before partner selection, designing the program. If there's funders that you think, okay, could be a good fit, having an open conversation with them, learning more about, their approaches to working with grantees, what that is, their processes, their systems, their, ethics, their values, and see if there is that alignment. And if there's anything that you feel like there's a red flag or something feels a bit off, definitely look into that, explore that with them. And if you think actually there isn't a synergy here, maybe you don't see things the same way, then maybe they're not the right partner for you. I think it's definitely part of a bigger discussion, like, okay, but I really need the resources to make this important work happen. And again, maybe that's linked into kind of the ethics and the due diligence kind of policy I was speaking to before, when do you make that judgment call? But I think, and its basic form is really important to find partners that are value aligned, that get what you do, that respect you, and just be open and have these conversations from the get-go, if you feel like there could be misalignment somewhere.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you. We're so close to out of time, and I was going to invite a lightning round, but as I look at the time, I want to respect everyone's time here. So we will we'll reflect back the Q&A and do another blog to share in the section along with this recording. But I want to share also, just going over that we have open source resources that, again, you have the masterclass series, but the fundraising handbook, our open source webpage. We've been publishing at a much more rapid clip this year to meet the moment. So a lot of the content is not in the fundraising handbook. There's also the Black Fox Brief, which was mentioned, and also invitation to explore our suite of services. And also just, I also just really want to share, recognizing we have such limited time left, and I want to turn it back over to Cindy. But as we wrap up, I want to bring us back to the core of what this work is really about. At its best, fundraising isn't just a set of tactics, it's how mission-driven people bring structure and discipline to purpose. And so, you know, at Black Fox Global, we say strategy is love made operational. So when purpose, process, and partnership align, results follow and momentum becomes durable. So I just want to thank you for being part of this conversation, for the work you do every day to turn vision into lasting change. Gratitude to Cindy, to Catalyst Now, to the amazing Black Fox Global team, Wonu, Trisha, Hamsini, all of you, the participants. Again, if today's session sparked ideas, explore our open source resources, sign up for Black Fox Brief. And we literally exist to serve leaders like you. So reach out if we can be of service through a paid engagement as well. And yeah, as I said, there'll be a replay, there'll be slides. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Cindy with so much love and gratitude for everyone participating today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. So you have covered everything, and thanks everyone. So I really want to end up by thanking you and your whole team for making it possible. It has been a great year in series, and I think it has been amazing and valuable for everyone. As Natalie already mentioned, everything will be shared after the session, but meanwhile, for the last couple of seconds, please help us by filling out the poll, which really supports and helps us shape future events and see what you liked and not. So yeah, once again, thank you to everyone who joined all year round. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. And yeah, just really grateful for everyone who joined today and for the whole series. So thank you so much again, and we hope to see you in other sessions.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Amazing. It's always an honor to teach. Really grateful for your participation today and throughout the series. And look for something in the coming days or weeks. Days, probably. Ciao, ciao. Bye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.